So you just got that slick new 50K starter account, or maybe you opted for the expert. Nonetheless, the email just came into your inbox saying that you just got your Trade-of-8 credentials or whatever credentials you decided to get. You made some profits and you're trying to figure out what is the best way to lock those in. That's the topic of this video, guys. So trailing your stop, right? So I'm a huge advocate for going for bigger intraday trades, right? So 50-point moves, 100-point moves, even trading on the higher time frames, 1 hour to 4 hour. So I trade futures, but I also trade options very heavily. I trade both, lots of different products. We're going to focus in on futures, specifically with price action, how we can use price action to identify a reasonable trail target, as well as when should you trail, right? Should I trail immediately? So if I'm going for a 50-point trade and I'm 10 points in profit, should I immediately move my stop to break even? These are both very important questions, and I'm going to show you just looking at some examples from today's price action. I think it is the perfect type of day where there's a ton of EV, there's a ton of expected value, no matter really where you got in. We had some really large candles on the 5-minute chart, and it's a good time frame to have this discussion. Obviously, the market isn't always in this situation. Market conditions can change, and as usual, you will need to adjust this to your system, okay, as well as the amount of risk that you take. Nonetheless, trailing and locking in profits is always a good idea, especially when you're going for bigger hits. Make sure, if you're not already for some crazy reason, a member of the MyFundedFutures Discord community. There's a lot of good chatter in there as well, some fun chatter, live support from the MyFundedFutures folks as well. And I also have my own community where we day trade live every single day if you want some help learning how to trade and getting you a little bit closer to passing your MyFundedFutures eval account. Whew, let's get into it. Okay, so let's look at today's price action. If you're not familiar with how I trade, I'm very big on trading the auction, right? I approach the market as an auction. What does that mean? I believe that people are always looking for a good price, right? And we can see where people have participated as they seek a good price. So I use the volume profile all over the place. I have the session volume profile, which is this indicator here, as well as the visible range volume profile, which does the volume profile for whatever's on my screen. I'm not going to break those indicators down. They are here. I am going to use them. There's other videos all on my channel as well as on this channel discussing the volume profile. So if you want an in-depth view of the volume profile, check those videos out. The market is still open, by the way. We just did like a little W here into close. Had a nice some calls here as well as a long that I took from this low into the POC. Okay, so let's actually use that trade as our first example. We'll jump down to the 5-minute, and we can even go to the lower time frame. I think the 2-minute time frame is a really good time frame to talk about follow-on candles. It gives us just more stuff. A really key component, guys, is that the market is fractal, okay? And it repeats itself, but more importantly, TA and analysis that happens on the 2-minute time frame happens on longer time frames. It just takes longer. I think why most people are hesitant to trade on like the 1 hour, for example, because they don't want to wait for these hours to print. For the sake of example, again, I'm on the 2-minute to demonstrate what this looks like. But if I got rid of the symbols here and the price on the right, you wouldn't actually know what time frame this is, right? This could be any time frame. That's key to what I'm talking about here, is that this works across all time frames. But if you're on the hourly, if you enter a trade on the hourly chart, your whole time should be hours, okay? Your thesis should take hours to play out. On the 2-minute chart, you're really checking in on every 2-minute interval. Cool. So we sweep this price here. Let me get rid of this alert here. Actually front ran that 750. We can see we also front ran this level 730 lower, but we'll do this example level. We'll just label this. This was the intraday low, and we see that it got swept. So I go long here at this price 772. This is actually a real trade that I just took today. Okay. I go long at 772. You see that it went into drawdown just a little bit. Okay. Went into a little bit drawdown, came back up. And the question is, where do I trail? Now, where was my target? So let's put on the volume profile, session volume profile, which is already on. We just can't see it because we're super zoomed in. Give this a second to load. Maybe it's not going to load on the 2-minute. So what I'll do is I'll jump to the 5. We'll let that load, and then we'll just mark it up with another line here. This is we'll mark it as the 5-minute point of control and take profit. Okay. And then we'll jump back to the 2. Cool. So the EV on this trade, nothing crazy, 58 points. That's actually a pretty good trade. But this is why this environment is a good time to talk about this, because there's so much EV all over the place. Okay. So I get into this trade. There's 72 up to 832, right? There's 58 points of expected value. When should I start to trade? So my rule of thumb, right? Or when should I start to trail? Sorry, when do I want to trail my stop? My rule of thumb is trail after 70% of EV is hit. Okay. This is a rule of thumb for anybody who's not familiar, right? For whatever reason, that's fine. I know people all over the world are trading. This is a saying that we say in the US, but that just means it's a general rule. It's flexible. It's a framework to think about it. It doesn't mean it's concrete. Okay. So let's do a little trade idea. And I think I can do that with, there is some tool here on TradingView. I actually never use this tool. I usually just use the lines, guys, which is why this is eluding me. So yeah, I take a long position from here and there's my TP. And let's say that my stop is below this candle, right? It should be, under where I expect it to run. So this is the EV. This is the trade, right? So we can see that there is, 57.5 points here of EV. If we divide that by do times 0.7, so if we do 57 times 0.7, I should be trailing. I want to add my trail 39.9 points in. Okay. So if we want to figure out where that is, let's figure out where the entry is. So the entry is at 773. So 773 plus 39 gives me 812. So once the price cracks 812, which is up here, that's where I start to trail. Okay, so this 70% of my expected move. So we did the math. Why? Why do I do 70% and not sooner? Well, look at this price action. And in this case, I should have actually held this long, right? Here, just off the bounce here. But this is a good example of why you want to wait to trail. A lot of your trades, guys, you're getting in where the market is starting to move. We see that it consolidated here. Okay, it started consolidating here, then it started moving. We can also look at these 2-minute candles and we see that we just start to get these follow-on candles here at the 1526 candle, right? So we have the 1524 candle. We finally get a 2-minute follow-on candle where the open is at the close. Okay, it stops barcoding. We see that the open and closes are overlapping. We get a close to open that's not overlapping. Okay, so we get some follow-on, which is sign of continuation. So we have this continuation breakout signal on the lower time frames, but we see that that's after I've been in the trade for a while. If I start trailing too early, if I start trailing in here, I'm going to get stopped out, which is what happens to a lot of the people in my Discord. Probably happens to a lot of you. I know it happens to a lot of you. I peruse, I watch quietly in the Discord. You trail too early and you're trying to lock in profits, but there's this idea, and people do this with risk management all the time. They confuse good risk management with driving good outcomes. Right? The perception of good risk management with driving good outcomes. People do this with RR. They say, oh, every trade is a 1 to 2 or a 1 to 3. And it's like, well, if you're always risking 1 point to make 3, but your trades always get stopped out, that's not a good system. Okay, same with this. So if you trail too early, you will get smoked. The reason this is a rule of thumb is because not all trades are the same. Okay, the reason I say 70% is that you are probably you've locked in a reasonable amount of your expected value. That's what I mean by EV. You've locked in a reasonable amount of this expected value. Okay. And we know that the market sometimes will lose steam. It will front run levels at the end. So imagine that, the POC is here. It could front run the point of control here. If I get trailed out right before that, I've locked in over 70% of what I expected my trade to do. So that's why I use that as an example. Now let's look at the bigger trade. Let's imagine that instead of taking that to there, I wanted to long to this high. Let's say that I actually had the idea that it was going to run and retest this high, which I didn't, but let's just use that as an example. Okay. I would want to trail, from here to, so this is 172 points on the move. So we'll do the same thing. 172 times 0.7 is 120 points in. So we'll just add 120 to 773. 773 plus 120 means I would really start trailing at 893, okay, which is here. Actually, we'll just move the last trail example, 893, and we'll change the color to green here. So this green line is where I start to trail, okay? Now ask yourself, again, this is a rule of thumb. Given the price action here, we broke through, remember, this is the point of control here. This is the point of control. We've actually passed it. At this point, we're probably going to ask ourselves, well, where is the value area high on the session? Right, so we'll zoom out. The value area high is up there. There's this shelf here on the volume profile at 924. If we run to here, what are the odds that we don't finish the move to the top of this shelf here, right? And that's exactly what it did. It cracked this high, kept going up, right? So that's why it's a rule of thumb. So at this point, once we crack the point of control with strength, okay, I'm not even touching this. I'm probably, if I add a trail, right, this trail is going to be very conservative. I'm going to put my trail way down here in this case, okay? And this is why this video is important. I want to talk about this because what I do not want to do is once this thing breaks out and shows that it has strength here, right, that it's definitely going to get across this shelf, which has confluence with this local high. I don't want to get out of the trade if it just does a random, like we see this little top wick right here. Okay, let me zoom in for you guys. See this little top wick right here? Okay, I don't want this to take me out the trade. That's crazy. That's stupid, right? There's so much confluence that this is going to run and at least get to the top of this shelf because that's how I trade with my system. So trailing has to make sense with your system, just like with your entries and exits, your stop management, right? I've done a ton of videos talking about managing your stops. You can't just use a fixed RR on your trades, okay? I can't just put my stop right below my entry and say that I have good risk management. That doesn't make any sense because we know that the market likes to run through these levels and sweep them, which is exactly what it did before it bounced. So I need to put my stop where I can eat a sweep reasonably, still not get, blow up my P&L and let the trade run. Same with trailing, right? Your trailing needs to be a combination of reading the candles, looking, am I getting follow-on candles, right? Am I getting candles where the open is at the previous close? What is the confluence on the volume profile? If you're using VWAP or any of the other tools, RSI, whatever your system is, right? I don't use those things, but it should match, okay? The way that you execute your trade to match your trade thesis. Say that again. The way that you execute your trade should match your trade thesis. It does not make sense. If you type, I think the market's going to go from here. Whoops. Why is my arrow? My arrow's getting crazy. If I think the market's going to go from here to here, okay, why would you have a stop that is, right under your entry, right under where you think it's going to actually make the pivot? Let's say you pinpoint it. I see this pretty often. This is usually due to a lack of confidence. Okay. If you're worried about losing money, you're like, Forrest, well, you're saying I should let my trades breathe more essentially. Yes, I am. How do I not lose a ton of money? Well, you have to trade lower risk. The single bullet, and I'm sure a ton of you are thinking this because people always ask this to me when I say, hey, widen your stops. They're like, well, I'm going to lose a ton of money. It's like, guys, you're trading too many contracts, okay? It's up to you to know why your position size is the way it is and in the grand scheme of your strategy for trading, why you're using prop firms, whatever it is. I don't really care about that. The point is, though, that the only way that you're going to be able to let your trade breathe is if you set it up that way, right? So if that means that you have to trade less risk instead of max contracts, right? Maybe you need to go to one contract. Maybe instead of one mini, you should go to 3 micros, 5 micros, right? Decrease your leverage until you can execute exactly how you want to. And then once you've built up a batch of good execution, then you can start to lever up. Plus, you can always build a cushion in your fancy new account that you just caught. After you pass, you build up a cushion, then you can increase your leverage from there. So that is how I handle trailing. Again, rule of thumb, 70% of EV. Don't even consider trailing, any of my trades until I see that my trade is going to hit, right? I do not trade based off my P&L is the key there. If you trade based off of your P&L, you're very likely unconfident. And that just means either one, you should just trade less to where you're more confident, right? You're not worried about your P&L anymore. You could just let it breathe. Or two, if you get stopped out early on a trade, right? Very, very early, you're constantly doing that. Your entry is probably bad anyways, right? Try entering where your stop is in the first place, right? So if your stops are always getting hit and then your trade works in your favor, which is very common for people, right? Your stop gets hit, then it goes your way exactly like to the penny. The next time you have a trade idea, enter where your stop is. I'm telling you that it's going to help. That is a quick tip that I've given a lot of people, and we tell people in our Discord as well over at Trade Edge. That's it for this video, guys. Somehow, I thought it was going to be 5 minutes and it was 17, but I hope you find this useful. Do subscribe to our channel. Do join the MyFundedFutures Discord community. There's always, training sessions. They have giveaways, fun things as well. Some more cool stuff planned for this channel. So definitely want you guys tuned in. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. See you in the next video.